Each year, I make a programme about remembering the war dead. Remembrance was something which divided Ireland even before partition, and in the years since, it has been complicated by the twists and turns of Irish history on both sides of the border. This year, on the 90th anniversary of the end of the Great War, I'm embarking on a journey throughout Ireland, examining the changing attitudes to remembrance. In towns across the island, there are still memorials. This Celtic cross is situated on the main road through Drogheda. Sean Collins has studied every one of the 400 names.
As a child, I remember the parade would come on the 11th of November, the nearest Sunday, and it would come round the corner as we come out of chapel, and like any curious child, I would stand to look, and my father would say, come along, don't look at that crowd. Because I would have to say, I wouldn't be from a poppy-wearing tradition.
As the survivors died, so did commemoration. But in 1999, Sean Collins became mayor of Drogheda, and in the new climate which followed the 1998 agreement, he decided to reintroduce the ceremony.
We had no British Legion, we had no tradition of the Legion, we didn't know what to do. So very kindly, John Dunnigan of the White Abbey Legion, along with 15 of his colleagues, came here in that November in '99 to show us what to do. We didn't know what to do, and they brought along some wreaths and some colours, and we had about 70 or 80 people here. In the local paper, we pointed out that there are so many of these men whose families live in the same streets. Drogheda hasn't changed that much. You know, you can look at the names and say, look, they come from that street. And if you go look at P. Mullen, killed on the last day of the war in 1918, his daughter-in-law still lives in his house at Patrick Street.
Before partition, Dublin was the seat of British power in Ireland. The influence is still reflected in the architecture. Here at the National Museum, there's now a permanent exhibition to the First World War and Ireland's part in it. At that time, this was the parade ground of the Royal Barracks. After partition, it became Collins Barracks. Today, it is a museum. And I've come to meet two men who, in their own individual ways, have championed the cause of remembering those brave Irish soldiers.
And Tom, this is the story of the Dubs and the Munsters and the Skins.
Absolutely. Yeah, they went in April 1915. And
the peace which spread across Europe in 1918 did not extend to Ireland, where new battles were about to be fought. And remembering was part of the battleground.
There were poppy snatchers. One old lady who's sadly died recently told me as a child she wore her poppy but put a pin, a safety pin behind it, where if poppy snatchers would grab her poppy, they would catch their fingers in the pin and they wouldn't be grabbing too many more poppies after that. Just that we sort of learn from them, although there's artefacts.
Tom Burke was awarded an honorary MBE for his work perpetuating the memory of the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, one of the old regiments disbanded following partition.
We're putting these people back into Irish history where they should be, to be remembered looking forward to our new histories, to be remembered and put back where they should be. And remember that as fellow human beings, these are fellow Irish men and women and indeed their families who suffered an appalling tragedy, were lost and forgotten in the mists of 1916 and are now re-emerging to obtain their proper place in Irish historiography.
Since the 1970s, Kevin Myers has been writing about the national amnesia surrounding the Great War in Ireland. When he first raised his voice, it was not the fashionable thing to do, but he would not be silenced.
It's not an issue that arouses the antagonism that it did 30 years ago when I started writing about it in the Irish Times and other newspapers. Then it was a cause of much bitterness, and people bitterly resented the things that I was saying and the commemoration I was trying to achieve for the Irishmen who were doing what their political masters in certainly 1914-18 had urged them to do.
So was the change simply about a passage of time?
The big change wasn't about a passage of time, the big change was about Enniskillen. Enniskillen is the decisive moment in public commemoration in Ireland, because nationalist Ireland was able to ask itself, what in the name of God have we been incubating in our culture and in our society that men and women in this case, can genuinely set about the destruction of people who are only commemorating their war dead?
What you see here in front of you at the moment are Pipsqueak and Williford, as they were known as.
Right.
Which is the 14 star, the British War Medal and Victory Medal. No, there was a 14-15 star.
At his home in Limerick City, Tag Maloney shows me his grandfather's medals. Jack Cleary was a member of the Royal Munster Fusiliers, fighting in the rearguard action which followed the Battle of Mons in 1914. He was captured and spent the rest of the war in a German prison camp. In 1918, he returned to Limerick with his two brothers, who had also served.
Like so many who survived the war, Jack Cleary remembered those who did not come back to Ireland. And he was here on the 11th of November 1929 when the original memorial on this site was unveiled. I say original because it was blown up in 1957.
That's correct. On the 7th of August 1957, during the border campaign of the late 50s, early 60s.
Who claimed it?
Nobody ever claimed responsibility. No individual or persons ever claimed responsibility for blowing it up.
But the new memorial was built on this site.
The new memorial is built on the actual part of the old plinth.
But it might not have been built here. It might have gone into that park beside
Well,
us.
several members of the City Council at the time wanted the memorial to be placed in the People's Park. And that would have put it out of sight, out of mind of the people, because you had these people were of a Republican mould, and they didn't wish for Limerick people to be reminded of the participation that Limerick meant.
After 90 years, much of the evidence of the First World War in Southern Ireland has disappeared. But here at Boyle in Roscommon, that part of history remains. This is King House. It was a depot for the Connacht Rangers, and many young soldiers who walked this corridor left here for the Western Front, never to return. And today, King House is a museum, the centrepiece of which is an exhibition to the Connacht Rangers.
So it was just the 1st Battalion was out there.
Yes, and then
Gallipoli, the 5th Battalion were out there.
yes. And you even have a military cross.
Yeah, there's old.
Here I meet Oliver Fallon from the Connacht Rangers Association, and here I discover the real risks of remembering the war dead in rural Ireland.
To remember their comrades in that environment would have been impossible.
Would they have been taking serious risks, for example, if they had gathered at a war memorial to remember?
Certainly, in that political climate, certainly the last thing you wanted to do was draw attention to yourself. And, you know, these soldiers, these ex-soldiers, you know, if somebody took one out and shot him and said he was a spy, who was there to say he wasn't or was? You know, so the main thing you had to do when you came back was keep your head down, try and get on with your life.